This Emerging Issues Forum is sponsored by Front Wave Credit Union.
Front Wave Credit Union fights for their members, those dedicated to country and community, family and friends, for banking, lending, saving, planning, dream big. They got you. They're Front Wave Credit Union, and they've been making financial dreams come true since 1952. Check them out at frontwavecu.com. Well, good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. I know we'll have others joining us as we go along, but in the interest of everyone's time, we'll jump right in. We're very pleased. Well, first of all, my name is Scott Ashton. I'm the CEO of the Oceanside Chamber. So glad to have you all with us this morning. So very pleased that our presenter this morning is our new Oceanside Chief of Police, Fred Armijo. Chief Armijo is a lifelong resident of Oceanside and was officially hired as our new chief after serving in the interim capacity since December. So he was officially hired in March. And Fred was initially hired by the city of Oceanside as a lifeguard in 1989 and joined the OPD as a sworn officer in 1994 and was promoted through the ranks as sergeant, lieutenant, and ultimately captain, a role in which he directed each of the department's 3 divisions, support operations, investigations, and patrol. So Chief Armijo, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the introduction. I am very proud to live and work in this city. I've never had the inclination to do this job anywhere else. I think there's a little bit of a comfort that attaches to that I've always enjoyed. What I plan to do this morning is to discuss and share with you my initial areas of focus for the police department, as well as some very important things that we have to do some work on within the organization. And then I'll share with you what my number 1 priority for us is at this point in time. There's obviously on the profession of law enforcement, there are a lot of pressures for change. And in order for us to meet some of those expectations, we've got to better position our staff to be successful. And that has to come through some more improved and robust training. Our mandated training, typically we get that accomplished in 1-week blocks. So we'll put all of our staff through their required training over the course of about 5 months. And these 1-week blocks, typically there's about 20 to 25 members that attend each of them. And sometimes a particular lesson or skill is visited each year. Sometimes, depending on the mandates, it could be a couple of years before a skill is revisited. So what we started to do is we've moved into a quarterly format for a certain segment of our training. And it's when it comes to critical thinking, decision making, we've created this process where we're doing scenario-based training to improve ourselves in those 2 areas. And we've reduced the instructor to student ratio down to nearly 1-to-1, whereas in this format that I previously described to you, these 1-week blocks, it might have been a 1-to-5. And about every quarter, we're getting everybody through a topic. And every critical thinking scenario-based exercise is infused with de-escalation concepts. And so it allows us to build upon skills by having gone to this quarterly format. What we found, especially for these kinds of very critical skills, is that touching on them once a year or perhaps every other year, that really just allowed for us to kind of dust off the cobwebs and not truly build upon skills. So we've made that adjustment. And then in order to do that, I've got to find a way to increase our capacity to deliver that training. The instructors that we have in our department, it's all based on a collateral duty. So for instance, we've got detectives, motorcycle officers, people assigned to the harbor, people assigned to our special enforcement section, patrol teams that have specialized skills and will teach certain topics as a collateral duty. So we don't have any full-time instructor staff, which I've got to build out some capacity for that, especially as we move further into this more robust quarterly format where we're really diving deeper into critical thinking and decision making. Accountability is, and this is the kind of accountability that I'm focusing on with respect to community. Right now, we've not done the greatest job of communicating things that we do in our organization. And an example of that is we haven't had a full-time public information officer since 2003. And since that time, we've been band-aiding media relations, and it shows. So the accountability function for me is creating more windows of opportunity for people to see into the organization and see what's going on. Our website needs a lot of work, but fortunately the city is looking for a vendor to rebuild all of the city's websites. So we'll be able to take advantage of that. We produce a monthly report that has some pretty decent information in it, but you really have to data mine to find stuff that I think is more what the community is desirous of now. And this report, it needs work. It needs revamping. It's been the same format for probably 15 years. What I'm looking for us to develop is more of a dashboard concept where you can very easily see demographics for our officers, the people that we arrest, the people that we engage in use of force incidents with, the complaint profiles that we have. Those are all things that I think that the community is hungry for. The other aspect that I want to show in this dashboard report is the education level of our staff. I think the community would be very, very pleased and surprised at how many people have bachelor degrees and master's degrees in our organization. So we're working on collecting all of that data to be able to produce, I think, a much more user-friendly monthly report. And then the other drawback to our kind of a band-aid approach to media relations is that we've not done well, I believe, in truly leveraging social media to help communicate and inform the community. So the good thing when I mentioned we haven't had a full-time PIO since 2003, a few months ago, the City Council authorized us to hire a full-time PIO. And we are in the process of doing that now. We've got a handful of people going through a background process for us so that we can ultimately make a selection. I'm anticipating having someone seated probably within the next 3 months or so to truly help us better communicate and inform our community. One of the things that I'm looking to do on that front is, since becoming the interim chief, I do an internal weekly message to the department so that everybody can hear the message at the same time and not have it kind of filtered down. It's a quick message. I highlight great work that's happened during the week, but then I also talk about priorities and expectations. I want to do a version of that for our community, but tailor it to certain collections of communities where perhaps it's every couple of weeks or once a month, and talk about what's been happening in the community and highlight some programs and some activities that the police department's involved in. And then I'm also looking at creating our own YouTube channel and highlighting various work units and activities that we have in the organization, so that if people have questions about certain programs. The homeless outreach team is always a hot topic, no pun intended. And we do have a video that kind of showcases them that's on the city's YouTube page. I want to do a broader collection of those so people can see exactly what happens from one work unit to the other. And then community community is so very important. There are, gosh, probably about 15% of our staff, our sworn staff, are homegrown. And I want to leverage more people from our own community into positions within the police department, really to further expand our reach into the community. What I've been sharing with people internally in our department, that anybody who has a desire to achieve a specialized position or promote in the organization, they're going to have demonstrated some level of community connection coming into those opportunities. And it doesn't have to be that they served as a member of our neighborhood policing team. It could be something where in their personal lives that they've demonstrated some great community connectivity. I think that's going to be important for us going forward. There are a couple of other things that I'm looking at doing to help with expanding further into the community. There are concepts, chief panel sorts of chief advisory panel concepts that you see used to a small extent in our county, and to probably a little bit greater extent up in Orange and LA County. But I'm looking at 3 different versions. One would be a collection of pastors throughout our city that I would meet with perhaps on a quarterly basis, because they are leaders in our community, and then it creates more voices for me to be able to listen to. The same concept would apply to a youth advisory panel that would be more targeted to late teens, early 20s, because that's another area, another opportunity, another listening opportunity. The last one would just really be kind of a community member at large, collection of leaders that, again, I could meet with perhaps on a quarterly basis. And the idea for me is, through these listening sessions and relationship building, it could help shape policy. It could help shape how we distribute resources around the city, but also, more importantly, create more community connections. I think it's so very important for more and more members of our community to see our staff here in the police department as humans, not just people wearing these outfits. So those are my areas of focus. Now, we have a lot of, I think, very important things to tackle that I'll share with you. First of all, we have not had an organizational analysis done on the police department since 1988. And we are so long overdue for that. What I want to do is establish a baseline of where we're at with all of the services that we provide to the community, so that we can then share that information out and really ask the question, are you happy with these services? And if you are not, let's figure out where we need to grow so that we can meet expectations. But I can't do that until we really do work on establishing that baseline. And I'll share with you this is embarrassing, but I'll share with you the fact that this study was unknown to anybody working in our department until about 3 years ago. And when North River Farms was in the EIR process, I was asked about the priority response times that were listed in the general plan, and out of it came this reference to this 1988 study, and the city clerk's office helped pull it out of archive for me, and honestly, it's embarrassing that nobody in our organization was even aware of that having taken place, number one, and the fact that based on that study, we had established response time goals that were referenced in the general plan that we weren't even following because we had a different set that we had established over the years. So we need to re-engage in that process and again, really establish where we're at across the board with all of the services that we do provide. We divide our city up into 4 sectors when it comes to how we distribute patrol resources, and each of those sectors has 2 to 3 beats in them. And typically we assign an officer per beat at any given time of the day. And we have not updated those boundaries since about 2000. And I know folks on this Zoom, we've grown by well over 15,000 residents in that time. Our business culture has completely transformed, especially when we look at the, this jump into hospitality and tourism. And what has happened over that time is the distribution and workload is really out of balance. The other thing that I think we didn't do well enough back then is that we didn't take good enough advantage of geography for natural barriers between these boundaries. Many of the boundaries are just in the middle of a street, and that really doesn't make sense for problem solving when you have one officer assigned to an area on one side of the street and an officer assigned to the other. Whereas geographical boundaries, where we can make those happen, make it much more efficient and easier for an individual to take complete ownership of a problem. And then I don't believe that over the last 15, 20 years, as we've grown as an organization, I don't believe that we've done so very purposefully. We've added elements here and there throughout the departments, but the way that we're currently structured, I think we're still built for policing in the late 90s and early 2000s. And it's almost to the point where we really just need to erase the board and rebuild the organization based on contemporary needs, contemporary expectations, changes in the criminal justice system. We're there. We're due for something like that in our organization. Wellness is a huge thing in the profession right now. I was at the FBI National Academy in October through December of 2019, and a lot of the content and a lot of the coursework back then was built around wellness. And I can tell you that as an organization, we've kind of inched into those spaces, but not enough. And the reason why I say that is because the unfortunate nature of our business exposes police officers, unfortunately, to some of the most evilness that our society has to offer. When you think of having to deal with folks who murder, folks who molest and sexually assault others. And what can happen is that there can be some jading that happens and a change in your perspective on humanity. And we need to do better at making sure that our staff realizes that, you know what, yes, even though we do come into contact with a high percentage of people who do engage in very terrible acts, that's a small percentage of our community. The vast majority of our community, as we all know, is made up of great quality individuals that are just trying to make their way in life and do right by their families. And in this concept of wellness, what I think we need to do a much better job of is that when an officer is on a call that's very tense, you can build and accumulate baggage on that call. And what we need to do is a better job of teaching our staff how to reset so that we can leave any of that accumulated baggage behind and start the next call fresh. And one of the things that I've talked about with staff internally is trying to develop the mindset of treating every call as if it's your first and your last. Much easier said than done, especially knowing that we really need to do a much better job at positioning our people for success in that way. There's little things that people can do, breathing exercises, mindfulness, but there's a whole host of other techniques out there that I think that we can do a much better job with educating and teaching and preparing our staff for. And then we have leadership development programs that we need to implement, because between now and the next probably 2 to 3 years, there's a couple of generations of staff that will be retiring. It's going to create more leadership holes and gaps. And so we need to develop a leadership program now so that people are better prepared to fill those roles. the scroll of very important things to tackle is pretty significant, but I will share with you, I'm not calling those priorities, because I think when you say you have 10 or 15 different priorities, nothing's a priority. My number one priority at this point is filling positions. We had been hovering around 14, 15 or so vacancies at the police officer level, probably since about 2016. And we didn't adjust. We continued to do the same sorts of, I guess I'll call it recruiting, but I'll explain that further in a second. Recruiting activities, expecting a different result, and that doesn't work. And what I mean about the recruiting activities is I think a lot of our efforts were really advertising in nature and sort of passive, not true recruitment, where we're going out into the community, going out into the educational institutions, going out into different businesses to grab people and bring them to our testing processes. That has to change. As I sit here today, we have 20 police officer vacancies. We have 5 record technician vacancies. We have 5 dispatcher vacancies. And that causes a huge strain on staff, and it has a significant impact on our ability to provide services. And that has to change. I have a couple of things in the works. We are developing a robust lateral hiring incentive program that I should be able to launch here in the next couple of weeks. But then I also need to develop a separate program that grows our own future police department employees right here in our own community. This lateral hiring incentive program that I mentioned, for me, that stops the bleeding, because we're bleeding right now, and that's kind of going to serve as our tourniquet. But at the same time, I need to develop this other system where going forward, we always have this pipeline of new staff that we're growing right here to fill not just police officer positions, but to fill our dispatcher positions, to fill our analyst positions and our forensics positions. Those are all very important aspects to providing quality service to our community. So that is the number one priority that we have for our organization right now. So those are the topics that I thought I would share, and then I'm sure there's questions, and I'm open to hear anything.
Thank you, Fred. So yeah, I invite everybody to put their questions in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself and ask a question. But I will start with what's in the chat. So we do have a question on how are officers being trained to respond to the increasing homeless situation and crime around it, narcotics, drug use, etc.
So here's some challenges that I think it's important for everybody to understand. Part of this is COVID related, and the other part is how the laws in our state have changed through various pieces of legislation and propositions. So presently, we can arrest somebody for either being under the influence, which is a misdemeanor. That person we can book into jail, and typically what happens is once they're sober from either alcohol or drugs, they're released, and that's an 8 to 10 hour process. If we find somebody in possession of drugs, it's a ticket. We cannot book them into jail. If your vehicle is stolen and we find it and we find the thief in the car, we cannot take them to jail. That's a ticket. A lot of our efforts are significantly hampered in the fact that there's no immediate consequence to somebody's actions by walking away from the incident with a ticket. That has a psychological impact that drives the continuance of crimes. Now, when I say the COVID nexus or the COVID barriers that have been created, is because in the jails, they've had to limit the kinds of booking that they will accept, kinds of charges that they will accept, so that they can have a better control and limit the exposure of COVID-19 in the jails. But that's only one aspect. Up until about a month or so ago, there was one COVID compliant courtroom over at Vista. They now have two. And so that has created a huge backlog in cases at the DA's office because they can't get into courtrooms. That has a trickle-down effect. So pre-COVID, a deputy DA that had a felony caseload, that might average 30 to 40 at any one given time. That's well over 100 right now. Pre-COVID, a deputy DA assigned to misdemeanor cases might have had about 100, 150. That's well over 300 or so right now. Consequently, we have a number of cases, righteous cases, that we send over to the DA's office that aren't being filed simply because the DA's office doesn't have the capacity to file. So there's that capacity issue. And then when they do file, you've got this backlog of cases that are waiting to get into a courtroom. That all has a trickle-down effect. As an example, when we were trying to address the South Oceanside Boulevard encampment space that was over across from the Smart Final and the Starbucks area, we had 5 different occasions, the same person that we arrested for selling narcotics in that general area, couldn't get them booked into jail. In that space, we had, I want to say there was at least half a dozen overdoses, all attributed to fentanyl. And then we have this other challenge right now with mental health. So as I'm sure that many of you are aware, our chronically homeless individuals typically suffer from either a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue. It's not uncommon for us to could detain somebody for a mental health evaluation. Right now, we have essentially 2 primary places to take them. Palomar Hospital, they have a behavioral health unit there, or County Mental Health down in San Diego. It's not uncommon for us to hear that wait times at Palomar Hospital are 8 hours. 8 hours. So that's a police officer taken out of the city for that long. And when that happens, we'll go down to San Diego. That's still probably about a 3-hour turnaround time, but it's better than 8. So capacity when it comes to mental health is huge. When it comes to substance abuse, previously, if somebody were arrested and they were under the influence or they were in possession of drugs, they could participate in drug court. And a successful participant could ultimately have their case dismissed. And there's therapy sessions that happen within drug court. Now, because of changes in the law, there's no incentive for people to participate in drug court because they can do a couple of days custody time and just be done with their case. Then you add on to the other struggles that I mentioned with COVID. It really does demonstrate that when it comes to homelessness, it is not, and we knew this back in, I think kind of came to the realization back in 2014, you cannot arrest your way out of homelessness. 2014 for us in our city, that issue started to spike. And if you recall, that's when we partnered with Main Street, Visit Oceanside, and the Chamber to try to do some education and partnering. And we created the homeless outreach team. The most significant thing that I think as a community that we can do is get behind the concept of supportive housing that has case management, wraparound services. Here's why I say that. You cannot expect somebody who's chronically homeless, who's got a mental health condition or a substance abuse issue, to get themselves to service appointments during the day and then go back out into the bush at night and believe that they're going to have any gain or progress made following that format. They need to be housed first, But at the same time, you need this wraparound service concept where you're getting them to the services that they need. And that's where case management comes in, which is a lot of what our homeless outreach team officers do. Without somebody, especially when we're dealing with the chronically homeless, holding their hand, getting them to various service appointments, they won't go. And they've got to have that probably for months before they're really capable of now, all right, I got it. I can make it to my own appointments. I'm on this pathway to being housed. And that's where we, not just Oceanside, but I think many communities that struggle with this issue need to create more capacity for that. The acute homeless, you really don't see them. You really don't see our acute homeless population because they're not suffering necessarily from mental health or substance abuse issues. It's more economic in nature, and they're on it with trying to get themselves into services and get programs and get them back into a housed situation. But it's the chronic homeless that we encounter the most, that cause the most quality of life issues for neighborhoods and our business community, that we need to grow this capacity. I'll share with you the motel voucher program that was instituted a month and a half or so ago. That is a step in the right direction, because even though it's this motel concept, there's services attached to it. And our homeless outreach team and neighborhood services were there to help get them to services and have this sort of case management concept. Surprisingly, and I'm not sure that any of us anticipated it being this high, but it's just under about a 50% success rate at somebody accepting that program and then getting launched into some kind of service. Just over 50% refuse any service whatsoever. Unfortunately, they took the 3 weeks of stay at the motel and then were exited. But that percentage of just under 50%, I think, is actually surprising, and it's good. It's a very good thing for us. I see that program being this kind of not a stopgap, but it's in the middle of us launching the shelter that is being planned for the old Ocean Shore site. That I think will have a much bigger impact for us. But no pun intended, we're handcuffed when it comes to addressing these very significant quality of life issues. There's a person that has been causing significant problems for us near the underpass, that we were finally able to get into a mental health hospital. I don't know how long that individual will be there, because sometimes what we see is this quick revolving door when we do take somebody to a mental health institution. But I'm hoping in this particular case, he'll be there long enough so that the doctors can truly start helping him out with his condition. So it sounds dreary, but I don't. I think it's important for everybody to know the facts and the challenges that we're dealing with.
Thank you. There's some questions and comments related to recruitment. First of all, just a comment on that we appreciate that the focus on homegrown officers and promoting from within. Just some questions related to how can we as a chamber and community be supportive of recruitment efforts, and how are you approaching it in light of everything that's happening with the perception of law enforcement and people that might have written that off as a potential career?
So what I have in the plans is to actually do some real recruiting, but my plan is to leverage our educational institutions. I think we have enough partnerships and relationships with MiraCosta, Palomar, Cal State San Marcos, where for anybody that's done teaching, that guest speakers are always in high demand to help fill certain curriculum. And we certainly have some expertise within the police department that can add value to different curriculums at the colleges. What I want to do is provide that service, whether it be from our own recruitment team that we currently have in the PD, or whether we create a separate speakers bureau within the PD that can get into classrooms and provide value presentations. But then out of it, we're going to be making connections and grabbing people and bringing them to our testing processes. Another area that we really haven't leveraged, and it may be a little bit more of a challenge to get into, because it's not like an athletic program at the collegiate level is going to need a presentation on murder investigations. So we're going to have to figure that angle out a little bit. But I want to leverage athletic programs because, from my perspective, you already have this sense of teamwork, personal responsibility, accountability, leadership that you find in athletic programs. It's very similar to what our needs are in our organization. Those are two angles locally that I want to tap into. This lateral hiring incentive program, we have a recruiting video on our website that needs updating, but I want to target laterals, and I'll share with you why, to stop the bleeding. The amount of time and money when you compare hiring an entry-level police officer compared to a lateral police officer from day one until they are full duty solo operating out in the field, for an entry-level officer, you're looking at probably 16 months. For a lateral police officer, depending on their years of experience and where they come from, that could be three to 4 months. And then the cost difference from targeting a lateral police officer is about $72,000 cheaper than an entry-level officer, because entry-level officers we hire as a recruit, we send them to the academy. The academy is just over 6 months long. There's a salary and cost to doing that. So for now, targeting that lateral market to help stop the bleeding is actually a cost savings. But what I want to do is I want to redo our recruiting video. And for laterals, they know what police departments are comprised of. So I don't need a video that showcases SWAT or motorcycles or the harbor, the beach teams and things like that. I need a video that's going to showcase our city and what our city has to offer, because I think that's what a lateral is going to be more interested in. So there may be some opportunities for us to perhaps lean on some assistance from the chamber when it comes to that endeavor. But I think we're going to be much better suited to have a recruiting video that sells the city, not the police department. So that's a space that we'll be venturing into.
Great, thank you. We do have a question on one of our businesses that uses Argis to track crime in Oceanside, asking how often that database is being updated and will it be linked or replaced on the OPD website?
So it's monthly, and the monthly report that we produce on the website has data that's pushed to Argis. Our website, what my plan is, when our IT services division for the city finds a vendor to rebuild our websites, we're going to make it so that kind of information doesn't require data mining within the website itself. It'll be much more easy to access. Argis itself, though, when you go to their web pages, they produce a lot of great information for the whole region, especially the crime bulletins that come out and the analysis that they do. But our data gets pushed. Our data gets pushed ongoing every day, but we provide a monthly totaling of stats to Argis.
Thank you. We have about 8 to 10 minutes before we have to move on to our legislative report. So if anyone has a question that they didn't have a chance to put in chat, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
I'll share something else with you real quickly then on my idea for growing our own future employees. So not that I'm biased to our own community, having grown up here, but I think we have a lot of great talent in our city. And I want to provide more opportunities, especially to our younger residents. Over the years, we've had to say no to people who've wanted to be police officers, as an example, because they had done something foolish as a juvenile, and there just wasn't enough time and distance. I'm not talking about stuff that just rules you out forever, but something that just shows, hey, you know what? We need you to demonstrate that you've grown up and learned from whatever that issue was. I want to create a program where we can give those folks a chance much sooner, much earlier. And we have a position in the police department called a community service officer. We primarily use those positions at our front desk, and it's a career sort of position. What I want to create is something very similar to that, but it's not a career position. It's provisional, and it would last for maybe about 3 years. The idea behind that is, in that position, I don't have to worry about having to give that position a gun and having to worry about them engaging in any kind of use of force, because that's not what that position does. They can take collision reports, they can take crime reports, they can do case enhancement work for our investigators, they can assist in community outreach. Pretty much anything that a police officer does, minus getting involved in arresting and enforcing laws, this position can do. So the risk level of whatever that foolish sort of thing that might have happened as a juvenile is much less. And so this provisional concept for me is that, look, you know, we can give somebody an opportunity from our own community to get into the organization. I can have this kind of position assigned to every work unit in the organization, and I can move them around once a year. So after a 3-year period, they've been exposed to every division. But also it gives us the opportunity to learn what their true character is and how teachable they are. So that at that 3-year period, we know that, okay, this is somebody that deserves a chance. And it's decision-making time, because at that point, they're going to either move on to some other career, maybe this just wasn't the place for them, or it's time to become a police officer, it's time to become a dispatcher, it's time to become a forensics technician or an analyst. And then that creates this career path opportunity for us. The other thing that it does is this kind of position frees up police officers to do more policing activities. So that can help with our response times going down. It can help with our case clearance rates with respect to increasing capacity within our investigations division. I think this could be a very successful tool for us. And in many respects, it's very similar to what fire has done with their EMT program. It's a very similar in nature. That concept is something that I don't have down on paper yet. I'm not ready to launch forward with a request for authorization to move forward with it. But I will be getting that down on paper and refining it soon. And I think that could be a great pipeline for us. Right now, we've got explorers, we've got cadets, we've got Oceanside High School's Academy of Justice students. So I think the seeds are there. We just need to fertilize and water it.
All right, thank you. And we do have time for one final question that came up in chat. Is our compensation comparable to neighboring cities?
So it depends on the position. Here's one struggle that I'll share with you right now. And it's alarming. So in dispatch, we have about 24 dispatch positions, 5 vacancies right now, and then we have another 2 or 3 people that are in training, so they can't count as a full dispatcher yet. Someone can come to our city and get great training in a busy city and then leave and go to a neighboring city for probably nearly half the workload and get paid $7 more per hour. that is creating huge challenges for us within dispatch. I think on the police officer side of things, the city over the years has tried to keep us within that 1 to 3 range within the county. Since the last negotiation process, I believe both the sheriff's department, Escondido and maybe San Diego PD, I think their contracts have all surpassed where our officers are getting what their compensation is now. Negotiations, I think, for our police officer units start in the next couple of months, because their contract expires at the end of the year. So there's a gap that needs to be made up there as well. Our records technicians, I mentioned, we have a gap there. They're not compensated as an industry. Records technicians in the law enforcement profession don't get paid a lot, but ours are kind of on the lower end. It creates problems with staffing, and that trickles down to morale, and it trickles down to just being spread so thin, and the exhaustion that can take place.
Great. Well, Fred, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please know that the Chamber's here to support you in any way we can, and you know how to reach me, so just stay in touch with anything we can do to help.
I will, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to our legislative reports, and starting with Congressman Levin's office, we have Kyle Crahell-Frolander.
Thanks, Scott. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you. It was great to hear from Chief Armijo. Congressman Levin and I met with him just about a month ago to discuss how our office can support the police department. Congressman Levin actually submitted one of his very limited number of community project funding requests. This used to be called earmarks, to fund dash cams for OPD for their vehicles. So we're going to continue doing what we can, of course, from a federal level to support our police. So it's great to hear breath of fresh air from Chief Armijo. I also wanted to provide an update on an issue that's very important specifically for Oceanside. As we all know, especially if you live anywhere west of El Camino Real, the train horns are still blaring as we get into our summer. So I've been corresponding with the Federal Railroad Administration. That's the agency that's actually in charge of approving the quiet zone for train horns. As we all know, the quiet zone application has been repeatedly delayed. So we're escalating it. We're doing everything we can. We've requested a meeting with the Federal Railroad Administration and with Congressman Levin, so not at a staff level, but with Congressman Levin for next Tuesday. And he's going to press them to approve the application without further delay. I think we all know, that quiet zone is important to residents, but it's vital for our hotels and tourism downtown, especially the 2 new ones. So it's a big priority of Congressman Levin's and ours to get that finally done and press FRA to do that. Some other updates. On Tuesday, Congressman Levin and I visited San Onofre, Songs. We toured the spent fuel storage, which finished loading. All the canisters of the spent fuel are in the spent fuel storage area. That was finished last summer. We also saw inside the containment domes and the other deconstruction activities. I'll tell you, having passed by those domes more times than I can count growing up here, it was wild to actually go inside, actually see the inside of the big containment domes at San Onofre. But they're doing great work there. In a few years, those domes, just like the Carlsbad Power Plant stack, will be gone part of our landscape. On some other legislative fronts. Earlier this week, Congressman Levin released a report that nominates 2 distinguished women veterans to be honored at the San Diego VA Medical Center. One is Jennifer Moreno. She was an Army captain. She was killed in action in Afghanistan, attached to a special forces unit. She's actually the first of the modern 21st century wars to be buried down at Rosecrans. And she will be the recommendation as part of our legislation to rename the San Diego VA Medical Center after her, the entire building, after Jennifer Moreno. And then we also had another great person from the report, Kathleen Bruyere, who is a leader in the local veterans community. And she's going to be recommended for an interior space at that building as well. A couple other quick hits. Congressman Levin's bipartisan bill to improve veterans job training and education benefits passed the Senate. So very hopeful that that will then get signed into law now. He introduced that with Republican ranking member Mike Bost, bipartisan bill. And as kind of mentioned, it improves veterans job training and education benefits, kind of cleans up some pieces from some previous legislation that had been passed already. which is a common thing. Of course, you find out some things that need to get fixed as you go down the road. Congressman Levin also joined a Senate colleague, so it's important to get the bill on both sides, right? Introducing the Stop Child Hunger Act. So this Stop Child Hunger Act would provide families who have children who are already eligible for free and reduced price school meals. He would give them an electronic benefit transfer card, an EBT card, for when school's not in session. So, when school's in session, they're getting their free and reduced price lunches at school. But outside of that, where are they getting some of that help? So this would help provide that gap. Recently, the House passed Congressman Levin's legislation that would prioritize veterans' economic benefits at the VA. So Congressman Levin specifically is chair of the part of the subcommittee of the VA that deals with transition and economic opportunity for veterans. So this would actually create a new administration at the VA that would prioritize the transition out of the military for veterans and service members, as well as education and employment programs. And finally, Congressman Levin introduced a bill to ban new offshore oil drilling leases off the Southern California coast, from San Luis Obispo down south. And that's, it seems kind of obvious to a lot of us, but it's important to recognize the economic benefits of this, because I think, it often gets put into a thing of, our aesthetics at the coast or something like that. But in San Diego and Orange counties, the ocean economy accounts for roughly $7.7 billion. $7.7 billion in economic activity, and it supports more than 140,000 jobs in coastal tourism and recreation. I know a lot of us here know that, but it's important to recognize how that's the trade-off here, and we need to protect our local economy from the threat of oil spills. It should prevent any new, again, this is new oil drilling off of our coast. So I think that's a lot of it that I have. It's always happy to provide any answers to questions. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate the update. Next, we have from Senator Bates' office, Kristen Raymeyer.
Hi, so I just wanted to, first of all, thank the presentation that we had today. Public safety is obviously a huge issue for Senator Bates when she comes to drafting her own legislation. So it's nice to see that Oceanside Police is really aware of the issues and the growing needs of the community and looking to adapt to be able to meet those needs. In terms of kind of what we're doing, a lot of our resources at the Capitol right now are being diverted to really just making sure legislation is getting passed during session, coming up with any revisions to the governor's budget, which is due with the deadline on June 15th. And then at the district level, we're still kind of dealing with a lot of casework, especially EDD issues, and sort of deciding how we can really provide some revisions as we see the community starting to reopen again, and how we can ease that transition in schools and restaurants, as well as local businesses, and getting them back up and running. So nothing too specific to report, but that's really what our focus is on at the moment.
All right. Thank you so much, Kristen.
Thanks.
So next, from our Assembly Member Tasha Borna-Horvath's office, Fernando Hernandez.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And it's always a pleasure to hear from Oceanside Police Chief. It's great to have him on our District Advisory Council on Public Safety, where the Assembly member brings together our public safety officials to discuss public safety related matters. So we really appreciate having his feedback during our first meeting of this year. The Assembly member has several bills that have moved on to the Senate. She's very proud to have bipartisan approval of her legislative package. The first that I wanted to share was her AB 66, which supports research and development of an early warning notification system for bluff failures. So this has been a rising regional public safety concern for several years. This research would help our public safety officials better coordinate to protect our residents and tourists that visit our coastline every year. And we're also very happy to have the support of the City of Oceanside on this bill. It's very important for our coastal communities to work together to coordinate an effort to protect our residents. We also have Assembly Bill 117, which establishes an e-bike purchasing incentive program to help people switch over to a more sustainable commuting option. While we've seen the demand for bikes go up over the past couple months during the COVID-19 pandemic, e-bikes still remain unaffordable for most Californians. So it's very important to address this cost concern. This helps address the last mile problem in commuting. So we're very excited to see past the Assembly. We also have Assembly Bill 335, which would allow manufacturers of recreational boats and marine engines to receive and retain specific contact information of their buyers, to provide them with product safety recalls and warranty notifications. And again, this is kind of a cleanup to some of the ambiguity and uncertainty of these manufacturers under the California Consumer Privacy Act. So this is the same exemption that we gave to road vehicle manufacturers in 2019. It's critical that we provide, consumers with this important information, especially as we see more and more folks go out to our coastline and enjoy the ocean over the summer. So we're very excited to have that move forward. And lastly, we're very excited to see the Assembly Members Starter Home Revitalization Act passed by the Assembly. This bill allows for smaller, more affordable by design homes to be built on multifamily lots. So this is really addressing that missing middle for more affordable options for young families. As we know, home ownership is an important avenue for families to generate wealth. So it's critical to have more opportunities for our lower income families and communities of color to achieve home ownership. So we're really excited to see this pass, and also helps attract local talent, which is a big one, for our businesses here regionally and throughout the state. So I'll go ahead and keep you all posted as more of our legislation moves through the cycle. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Fernando. Appreciate the update. Next, we have Crystal Jabara from Supervisor Desmond's office.
Good morning, everyone, and I'll echo the sentiments. It was great to hear from the chief today and hear about public safety plans, and obviously watching different law enforcement agencies and watching them shift the way they reach out to the public, and that community engagement has been inspiring. So it's always great to see. And then just on a personal note, just watching some of our young people, our San Diego County Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year winner from the San Marcos location had stated that he wanted to go on and be a canine officer. He was going to go to UC Irvine. So it was great to hear, someone who was truly in a leadership position from our community saying that that's the career that they aspire to. So that's reassuring. So on to the business of the county, a lot going on. We're heading into budget hearing month. So they had the public presentations last week, and then we'll start moving into public hearings. We have a normal board meeting next Tuesday and Wednesday. And part of that will be how to spend the federal stimulus dollars known as ARPA. And each supervisor submitted recommendations of how they wanted to see that money distributed. I'll give you a quick rundown on some of them. I'm going to start with one of them that kind of was a topic of what the chief spoke about, homeless services. So obviously a huge impact to our area. The supervisor suggested $10 million to fund a pilot program for 4 years, which would be North County homeless teams. The supervisor is already supportive of other pilot programs that he's introduced to address homelessness, mental health, getting boots on the ground with a variety of people, whether it's law enforcement or those that specialize in actual behavioral health, and sending them out as teams. You've seen those as PERT and HOT teams that go out into the communities, but this would be a new pilot program, getting more people in our communities that can help address some of these issues, because obviously our police department is not always the best suited to do that. They have other issues that they need to go take care of, and things like waiting 8 hours to get someone into a bed at a mental health facility is not the best use of their time. Also, we have the crisis stabilization, away from ARPA dollars, crisis stabilization units coming on board, which will be a new resource for our police officers, another place that they can take people that maybe don't need an actual emergency department, but can just need to be stabilized and evaluated. So back to ARPA dollars. So I'm going to give you a quick, this is going to be a fast run through. $20 million for food assistance, $30 million for mental health services, That would include youth that have been out of school and have other mental health services and needs to address depression, addiction, and youth suicide. We're seeing those numbers skyrocketing along with drug overdose for some of our young people. $20 million for property tax relief for landlords that did not receive rent. These are kind of the people, the smaller landlords that are stuck in the middle that have not received any type of assistance. We have concerns that they're not going to be able to pay their property taxes, which will impact all those pass-through agencies like school districts, fire districts, water districts, all those special taxing districts. So that could have a big impact on budgets going into the next fiscal year. So we want to make sure that those property taxes are paid. A $10 million grant program for youth sports fees waivers. We know these kids have been out of school and out of their youth sports programs for a long time. We want to make sure there's no barriers for those parents to get them back enrolled in these programs. Direct stimulus payments, 1.5 million for mentorship programs for financial literacy, job and life skills for transitioning foster youth into adulthood. There's a huge lack there. When these young people turn 18, they're kind of on their own. They don't really have anyone mentoring them, how to open a bank account, how to apply for a job, how to find a place to live. So we want to make sure that and we see a large number of these foster youth become homeless. And so it's easier to prevent someone from becoming homeless than once they're homeless and figuring out what to do from there. Small business stimulus payments, 7.5 million for restaurant fee waivers. We want to make sure restaurants aren't inundated with more fees. So we want to make sure that they have some reimbursement for that. 1.5 million for special events fee waivers. I know the chamber has experienced that. All those special events that they put on, they have to pay permit fees. So we want to make sure that we can bring back all those special events and not have people not holding events because they can't afford the permit fees. $41 million divided between each district, supervisor district, which is consistent with past efforts. So then each district has unique needs to make sure the supervisors can address those. $20 million to create a grant fund for signing bonuses for businesses that are struggling to get people back to work. And I know everyone has heard about that. Some industries are having signing bonuses, but not everyone has the cash and the ability to do that. So we want to have a grant program for that. For infrastructure, we are looking at a request for 20 million for broadband services for unincorporated areas. These are places like rural Borrego, Palma Valley, places like that are just really struggling to get any kind of internet connection. And that became glaringly obvious when we were trying to work from home, school from home. $20 million for community and public facilities maintenance and improvements, including road maintenance and paving due to decreases in state funding budgets for roads. So we want to make sure that we're not just kind of letting our infrastructure go. $15 million for legal services to help small landlords. They also, what I talked about, that kind of left behind in the middle, haven't had a lot of assistance. So as we move out of these eviction moratoriums, how best to make sure they are freeing up their properties. You know, we have squatters that really have nothing to do with COVID that have stayed in these properties or have moved into these properties. So kind of assisting landlords to make sure that evictions or any other services that they need are handled properly and having the legal advice that they need. $40 million for first responder and military families grant program. These are for families and household members of first responders, military service members, and their spouses who have experienced job losses or financial hardships due to COVID pandemic. We are looking at $20 million for youth camp tuition grants. So as these parents are going back to work, these kids are out for summer, making sure that these kids have a fun, safe, productive place to go during the summertime. And so parents who are transitioning back to work or are still struggling financially, to make sure there's grants available so these kids can go take advantage of some of these youth camps. And then some of you have heard about the supervisor launched a dine in and help out request program. So that will be heard on Tuesday, which would be a $50 million grant program, much like they did in the UK. Restaurants can sign up to participate in programs. Diners would get half of their bill, up to $10 per person on certain days of the week. So it would be, let's say, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays that restaurants are slower. Family of 5 goes in, up to $10 for each person off. So up to $50 off that bill. Helps the restaurant, helps the community members, and hopefully will drive more business and bring in more employees. So that is our request for Tuesday. I'm sure there'll be long discussions. And then for past meetings, we also, the supervisor has a drowning prevention program that he introduced and is launching, which will help in 2 different ways. It will help with swim lessons for young people and education for parents or other community members to make sure we're preventing drowning. And then the County of San Diego, the supervisor requested that we extend for unincorporated areas the ability for these restaurants to continue to do the outside dining. So we're hoping cities will follow suit and kind of allow that, get our restaurants back up on their feet. So a lot going on. I'll put my contact information in the chat if anyone has specific questions.
Thanks, Crystal. That's a great update. And as always, we'll be glad to partner with you on any outreach for these programs that need to get out to the business community. So thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a little bit of time for like brief 30-second updates if anybody has anything from their organization that they would like to share. If not, I'll just give a real quick update on the chamber. We do have our Heroes of Oceanside and Camp Pendleton event taking place at Arrowwood Golf Course on June 24th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. It is a dinner outdoors, so we're really excited to have our first full back in person event taking place. So encourage you to take a look at our website and register for that event if you have not already. And the other thing I'll mention is we are in the process of doing a 5-year strategic plan for the chamber. And in that, we've been doing roundtable sessions with groups of our members. We do have one coming up on the morning of Friday, June 11th. If you're interested in participating, just reach out to me, scott@oceansidechamber.com, and we'll see if we can get you plugged into that. So our next meeting is on July 1st, and we do have a representative from the Citizens Redistricting Commission that will be speaking. So very interesting topic, as this only happens once every 10 years. So encourage you to come out for that session. That will still be on Zoom. We have not determined exactly yet when we're going to bring this meeting back in person. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for being with us today, and hope you all have a great day. Thank you.